colleagues that are on the program. We have my utmost respect for this important topic that you're addressing today. As mentioned, I work at the Ministry of Finance. I'm the Deputy Executive Director, Head of the Procurement Policy Unit. Some of you might not know what our role is, but in Section 6 and 7 of the Public Procurement Act, we are the regulators of public procurement. So in addition to developing the law, the directives, the regulations, the bidding documents, doing investigations, monitoring of compliance, training, capacitation, and recently launching our e-government procurement portal, we are also responsible for advising the Minister on policy reform. The reason that we are here today, and I'm also speaking a bit quick because I've noticed we're about half an hour behind on the schedule and I'll rather allow some time for questions. The reason I'm here today is to indicate that public procurement is a very good tool used around the world to stimulate local economic development. And when our law was developed, Section 3 of the Act clearly indicates that we can utilize the Public Procurement Act and supporting policies to support our empowerment as well as our industrialization ambitions that we have as a country. So for me today is merely to highlight to you the fact that in 2019 already, so that's already 3 years ago, we issued a directive to all public entities in Namibia, of which there's about 173. They include all offices, ministries, agencies, they include all village, town, and regional councils, all municipalities, all commercial and non-commercial state-owned enterprises. And this 173 will now probably increase to approximately 200 with the amendment to the Act. All government entities, we call them public entities, are required by law to implement the local sourcing directive. This local sourcing directive indicated very clearly that if something is produced in Namibia, they must procure it from Namibian producers and Namibian-owned entities. So that meant that when we issued that directive since 2019, whenever a public entity, whenever NTN, as an example, or the Art Gallery, or the Ministry of Finance, or Ministry of Agriculture, no matter which public entity procures anything that is locally available and locally produced, it must be procured from a local supplier. And this is something that we developed and issued to develop the principles around local economic development, to support employment creation, to ensure that there's a demand for local products, and to ensure that public entities abide by these rules. Now, we have now started doing some audits on this matter together with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Home Affairs, and we will attempt to do Ministry of Defense as well, because they are the 4 biggest procuring when it comes to locally produced food, especially for the food tenders that are in the market. And so in the future we will hope to publish these reports as well. We are publishing our compliance audits on our website, we are publishing the review panel orders, all in line with the ambitions of transparency and for the public to hold us accountable. Now, local sourcing, we believe, has great potential. Around the world, especially in developing countries, government public procurement can contribute as much as 30% to your gross domestic product. And therefore, we have to utilize every public procurement opportunity in a way to support our government ambitions, whether it is to create jobs, whether it is to stimulate manufacturing, or whether it is to stimulate our agricultural economy. And so we very much will continue these ambitions. The other reason I'm here today, especially speaking to the women in agriculture, is because, as you might be aware, we are going to issue a code of good practice quite soon. The Code of Good Practice is a preferential procurement policy. So as you know, in our Act, we allow for certain procurements to receive, and categories to receive certain forms of preferences. One is that if it's produced locally, we procure it locally. But one of the factors that we've identified is that there are different categories of Namibians that through different forms of legislation, whether it's the Article 23 in the Constitution or whether it is the Public Procurement Act, there are certain categories that we would try to provide a bit more of a preference when we are procuring. So they include women, youth, MSMEs, previously disadvantaged, manufacturers, and I think those with environmentally friendly practices as required. So with that being said, when we issue this Code of Good Practice, I'm hoping for October, but let's say November, it's a tool that will replace the local sourcing directive. So it will no longer exist, but it includes the ambition locally. If you produce beetroot locally, we're not allowed to buy it from an imported source. Okay, so we want to stimulate that local producing entities. So we will have a big media launch on this quite soon once this is passed, but this is just to indicate to you it's a public document already, because last year on 31 October we gazetted the ambitions to launch this code for public input. We had sessions with NCCI and other organizations. I must say the feedback is not much. The industries are quiet when it comes to these matters. So I think we really need to also work together when we develop policies so that it also adheres to the ambitions that you have also for yourself. We're looking at working with AMTA a bit more closely so that when there is pattern that's available, AMTA can procure it and provide it to government entities. So these are areas, logistically it's a nightmare, but from a procurement point of view it should be possible. So these are the ambitions that we're trying. And then in the code of good practice, when there's a procurement taking place and an entity is 51% or more owned by women, then it qualifies as a woman-owned entity, Namibian woman, then we would like to give them some sort of a preference in a pricing evaluation. So even if you're slightly more expensive, maybe within 1 or 2%, there can be a preference given in the evaluation criteria to give you a bit of a preference in the market. So these are the ideas that we're having in developing reform and policy to support sort of the ambitions that we have as a country, right? I think everywhere I go, in all the meetings I have, all of the same ambitions. The problem with our ambitions is the implementation. It is when you have entrepreneurs going out there and planting butternut, having it available at good quality, and they can't get a shelf space to sell it. So these are real challenges that we're facing, and not so easy to fix always. You need a really strong coordinating body to really drive this together. So I wanted to present just quite briefly, also to help catch up with time, but I'm very much open to some of the questions that the public might have. Thank you very much.
Public is quiet about how will that affect the existing bilateral agreements with the imports that we do receive from countries like South Africa? I'm asking this because recently when we closed our borders due to the foot and mouth outbreak, there was an outcry from Farmers Weekly magazine in South Africa saying that we close our borders because we want to create employment for ourselves, and apparently it was unfair according to the SACU regulations, which I'm not very much familiar with, but I would like to know how it will affect the bilateral agreements with the countries that we do import and export with.
Thank you, Mr. Francois. My question is, I need to understand if there is any fair trading mechanisms for producers. Because like what the young lady was questioning on the butternut, if one doesn't know, you approach the buyer and they don't know what if you want to sell it for, or maybe they can also take advantage. So is there any mechanisms to ensure that producers are not being taken advantages of? And do we have guidelines on market prices for different, whether it's crop production or livestock? Is there a body to ensure that these guidelines are being followed as well? Thank you.
A complaint from SACU in terms of us limiting it. I, for example, am a poultry farmer, and just to give a bit of basis, you find that the chickens that are dumped here are much cheaper, and then people sort of complain when you give them your prices for what you actually farm to feed. So then where do we draw that distinction, or how do we work around that? Thank you.
Colleagues, thank you for the good questions. I must admit some of your questions is beyond the scope of our authority. When it comes to the bilateral agreements with SACU and other countries, we are not part of those discussions. We are merely creating a reform framework for public entities to procure local produce. Okay, so when it comes to the banning of imports, and when it comes to those types of elements, we unfortunately do not form part of those discussions or processes, nor do I think currently it's a requirement or a necessity for the reforms that we are currently partaking in. There is one reform, one issue that we are yet to address, which is the African Free Trade Agreement. because we are trying to stimulate the local economy and requesting government to procure from local suppliers, that does clash to some extent with the ambitions of what we're trying to do on an African-wide basis. So these are discussions that are ongoing. And I'm trying to remember all the questions now. So Ellen, your question on SACU, unfortunately we are not part of that. Our tax policy advisory services, as well as economic policy advisory services at the Ministry of Finance, are probably the entities, together with NAMRA and Ministry of Trade, who are working on those elements. Yeah, so that's on that. Maybe you can just also Photoshop me to look good in the aftermath. As for the colleague there at the back, yes, these preferences that we're going to be is for women, no matter what you produce, as long as it's in the list of goods that we have mentioned. That list of goods includes vegetables, it includes maize, it includes livestock. So what's produced locally should be made available locally. We're also supporting the industry north of the veterinary cordon fence, because since that meat can't come south, we are saying that if public entities are situated north of the fence and need the produce north of the fence, they need to procure it across from the fence, also to stimulate that economy there. With regards to the questions whether on price schedules and also on producers not being misused or abused, if that's the right word, it's difficult. So to answer it in full, since it also falls outside of our scope. However, what does fall inside of our scope is the PPU, our unit, is supposed to develop something we call price schedules. So our neighbors here in Botswana have a very nice list of common goods and services procured, whether it's batteries, pens, pencils, bottled water, they have descriptions for each, and then they say this is sort of the standard rate. Now we have not yet had the capacity to develop this, and it requires quite a lot of funding because you need to send people out to the shops to look at what is the sort of average cost of something. And we also need to do it in the regions because what we pay for water in Windhoek is not what we pay for that same bottle of water in Zambezi region because of the transport requirements. So this is quite difficult activity to start with because you also have to then do it repetitively every 6 months or at least annually. And if you have certain things that go up and down quite a lot, whether it is especially food, you really need to be on your game when you give a price schedule, because a price schedule is there to guide a public entity. So when they go out and they procure chickens, and we're saying the average cost of chicken is $50 per kilogram, and somebody offers it for $40, then I think there's something wrong with the chicken. Or if it's offered at $75, all of a sudden, because now prices went up, the chicken went up, now the public entity is saying is no, I'll go back out into the market. So price schedules is quite a touch and sensitive mechanism that we must use, but it is something that we have endeavored to develop. We have done some benchmarking with Botswana. We've spoken a little bit to the World Bank regarding this mechanism, and we are planning probably to speak to the Namibia Statistics Agency, who already captures costing as part of their consumer price index. So that's something that we'll have to develop in the future. And then I think my RAM ran out just before the last question, but I think it was something again with our agreements with South Africa will be affected. That's not part of our portfolio, but it's definitely something to start working on a little bit more in the future, and so that our policies can also inform each other accordingly. So very good questions. I think some of them just beyond the scope of our authority as given in the Act. Thank you. With regards to public awareness, it seems to be an area that's been challenging. However, it seems like the public is not always that interested, because we publish our documents on our website, our portal. We also publish them via Facebook, but there isn't really a big uptake, and it seems like the public is not really taking a keen interest in understanding the public procurement space and what we're doing there. So you're most welcome to join our Facebook page. And for the Code of Good Practice, there will be a press function and release, so at least you'll see that in the newspapers. And our mission is to do regional training for all public entities on the implementation of the Code of Good Practice. As for the question on implementation, yes, indeed, that is a very valid remark. Public entities are struggling to implement the current active regulations as it is, and putting another requirement of policy reform on them will make it a little bit more difficult. So we are endeavoring to do some additional trainings and provide guidance on this. also to record our trainings to be more available. And we're also hoping the public and the media will hold public entities more accountable with regards to these aspects, as much as we also conduct monitoring and evaluation. We have found that what they are reporting is not necessarily what is the case. So these are areas that we have to look at. As for our government having to interfere and intervene to get market access, I have two views on that. One is government is created to create a conducive atmosphere for business. Business is created by entrepreneurs who have an internal locus of control to drive their business forward and have to, on their own, fight for market access, because they're also competing with other farmers for the same sort of shelf space. So as much as government will have to lobby, and I think the retail chart is quite important for that, because we need to ensure that local products are available locally, specifically, but that also government is at least doing a good job to fight for foreign markets. A lot of our produce is being exported, which creates higher value for money for those that are producing and are able to export. But locally, I agree we need to create more opportunity, and I think AMTA is playing quite a pivotal role there. I think they also have a new CEO now. He comes from the central bank, if I remember correctly, and so he understands also from a national economic policy framework what we're trying and our ambitions are. So I'm hoping that will have quite an impact as well. Good, thank you. There were some more questions?
Yes, I just want to find out
that a public entity does not procure mangoes. It doesn't even procure butternut. What they procure is catering services. But these caterers have to procure their goods locally. It's a requirement. So you need to ensure that whoever is tendering, you need to probably partner and things like that. That's how these procurements take place. Another mechanism is to say that public entities, when procuring caterers or suppliers of food production, that they will procure the food itself, give it to them to prepare for the users. As you probably know, the school feeding program, they get food, people produce it for consumption. So what we can try to do, and I think some of the ideas that we have regarding this as part of HPP2 is to ensure that when the public entity procures that food, it probably procures it through mechanisms like AMTA, okay, to make sure that food is locally procured. Then give it to whoever the bidder was, the catering, in order to now prepare the meals for the recipients. So I think that's an area that we definitely have to look at in a bit more detail. I hope that satisfied your question in some respect. Thank you.
Because I once came into Metro and I found a whole bunch of things put together that is for Harare. So what did you guys buy locally? Was there anything that was locally bought from our farmers that could have been given in this program?
Are you talking about the food program?
Yes.
Okay, well, these two questions. Is that the question then?
Thank you.
Okay. So let me go to my brother here at the back. First question is on the GMO. So yes, I think the regulator authority has ambitions to set a sort of standards what we should procure probably in the country. Standards that should not conflict with what our holding ministries, like Ministry of Agriculture, is doing and so forth. So we have policies, I think, against growing genetically modified food, but I know that on our shelves we have GMO food. The worst thing is they're cheaper than our food. I'm tempted to buy that food because it's cheaper. The problem is I don't like GMO food. The concept itself bothers me because I don't think enough research has been done about it, especially on the long-term effects of nutrition and what it affects in the generations going forward. But be that as it may, that's something that we as a policy we should probably explore and look at in the future. As for growing food in your own backyard, that's not a PPU role. Personally, yes, I support that. I have a friend, he started a, urban farming initiative. You'll go out, you'll set up a farm in your backyard where you have some space. He'll grow the food for you, he'll give you a percentage, he'll take the rest and sell it to make it sustainable. Awesome. I heard that in 2 by 3 meters you can grow enough vegetables to support a family of 4. I don't know, Ben, maybe you can verify that afterwards. But so just on that, I agree with you. I think from a food sustainability, it starts at home. And I don't know why we're not doing it. Every culture in this country has a background in farming. I don't know why we don't do it anymore. Why did we lose that part of our culture? It's shocking. I think we must go sit around the fires and listen to our elders a bit more. It seems like we have forgotten the good things that we've done. So, to the colleague there at the back, the procurement done by the food bank, I have no information on that, I'm sorry. So I would rather say I don't know. I don't know. I'm guessing that program was run by the Office of the Prime Minister as a special program together with, I'm assuming, Minister of Agriculture. And I don't know how they procured that food. I have no idea. So I'm sorry, I can't answer you. But it's something to probably look at in the future. I'm not sure also where they got the funding, if it was government budget or whether it was some development support that they received. So these are some of the questions we'll have to look at. But it does pain me that we go and buy it from, well, I don't know who owns the metro, maybe it's Namibian owned, I don't know. But at least the produce should be locally, right? We should fight for more shelf space for local products. So for those who are entrepreneurs, I wouldn't mind seeing another woman go up just selling a bit products. No? There is quite a lot. And it's quite varied. Thank you. I don't know if there's any questions left.
Yeah, here.
Yes, sir. Please.
Thank you. I was actually the first one to raise my hand. I've waited quite.
With regards to the Act, it doesn't say buy the cheapest. Nowhere in the Act will you find that. It says buy the economically most responsive bid. Okay? What that means is when you receive the bid, you first check your mandatory documents, your Social Security, PIPA, Then you cancel out some that don't have it, and the rest go through. Then you do a technical evaluation, which has some mandatory requirements and a minimum score. Meaning that you might need 5 years or 10 years, as you said, that you might need, so that can be evaluated on a score, but a minimum might be 3 years, for example, to qualify. Then those that pass the technical evaluation, then we look at pricing. So only those who pass that stage, let's say there's 5, then we choose the cheapest. Okay? It's a good process around the world. And if it's your household buying things, you would do the same. Wouldn't you? Now let's talk about the other issue with regards to the requirements placed upon businesses to provide to government. I can tell you, even with those stringent requirements, government is suffering. We are buying from entities that are not providing. SMEs wants to be supported. For the last 20 years, all I hear is SME development. But when you speak about a public entity, all they do is complain about SMEs. Because when the opportunity is created, SMEs don't perform. We had a function, Kubabas. We bought lunch for 600 people. 300 of them were elderly. They sat the whole morning in the sun, under a shade, but it was hot. That lunch arrived 6 o'clock at night. That SME had no remorse. It's the way we do things. We ordered a banner, backdrop banner. We said we'll go with a new SME. They were the cheapest. But they didn't have the previous job experience that we normally require. So we want to give them a chance. I followed up for 3 weeks. We got the banner on the day of the event. I said, oh, what is this? No, we brought your banner. I said, I've been trying to get hold of you for 3 weeks. No, but here we are. But I said, where's the design? I haven't even sent you the design. They took our logo somewhere. They stretched it into 70,000 pixels. It was horrible. Colleagues, and it's not just SMEs, it's big companies also failing government. Government has wasted so much time on preparing bidding documents, evaluating, keeping bids for that bid to fail. Look on our website, there are companies now debarred or suspended from government public procurement because of this, and we're pushing this. And I will continue to fight for businesses to be debarred from government services, because continually they are failing government, continually. As for lessening the restrictions, that's not the role of our unit. the specifications and requirements are set by each public entity separately, but it is to gauge quality and ensure that the company is able to deliver the goods or service so that they don't have a failure. It is, however, difficult for startups. However, startups probably shouldn't provide services to government to start with, because you become dependent on government, and as soon as you lose your government contract, you go bankrupt. Go speak, it's all around the country. You should never be dependent on government for work. The only companies dependent on government for work are those doing roads and bridges and ports. Everything else, you must diversify your pool. Because you cannot be dependent on government, or you cannot even hope for a government job, because it is such a competitive environment. You should be able to survive without it. Okay? But if you want to work with government, make sure that you are trained, make sure that you do your documents well, make sure that you at least qualify on those basic requirements before they look at price. And we are not reserving these procurements for women, we're not reserving them for youth. They get a price preference in the evaluation stage, that's it. Okay? But we are reserving them for Namibian-owned companies, 51% or more at least, and then 30% previously disadvantaged in those cases where it's a requirement. So, in the current local sourcing directive. So I hope that answers you somewhat, but not fully. I know SMEs and everyone wants to be supported, but you also need to give back to government and provide a good service. So I'm now going to be escorted by the bodyguard here off the stage. Thank you very much.